Okay, some folks were having some difficulty still with the simulation. Again, I would encourage you not to overthink it, keep it simple. But here's kind of a solution to a counter problem. So I'm not going to solve the simulation for you at this point because people are still working on it. But this will give you probably enough that you could resolve the problems where you may be having difficulty. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a quick little script. It's going to have a counter. It's going to have a function to add to the counter. It's going to have a function to remove from the counter. It's going to have a function to print the results, and it's going to have a main wrapper function going around the whole place of it. So we start off with the add counter. Here you can see the basic function structure. So as we've talked about before, if you have curly braces on one side, make sure you have curly braces the opposite way on the other side, and a return that's sitting inside of it. Most commonly, the issues with code that people have turned in so far have been missing braces. If you're missing a brace, you're going to see something like a little red. Give it a second. You see that right there? That tells you right there. If you look at it, it says unmatched braces. Then you know that, hey, you've made a mistake. You put in the braces, and that little red X goes away. So that should be number one. That's the most common issue that people are having in their scripts that they turn in. So here's the add counter. Basically, it just prints off a statement saying, hey, I'm going to add to the count, and it prints off the counter variable, which I'm going to pass in as a parameter. The return of that is going to be that same parameter variable plus 1. So that's just going to add 1 to the variable and then return it out. For removing, I'm going to add one additional step into the remove. So I'm going to add an if statement right here. And that says if it's greater than 0. So we want to make sure you have at least 1 in that counter. We don't want to go to a negative number. So by putting that statement in there, it's going to ensure we don't go to a negative number. As long as it is a number of 1 or greater, then it's going to remove from the count, and then that basically is just the opposite of what you saw in the first statement. You return the counter variable minus 1. If it is, and it's going to take it to 0, then you'll have just return the counter variable, and it prints the message, keep the count the same. As far as printing the results, it's going to just print off two statements. One's going to be the total iterations as a variable I pass in. The second one's going to be the total events remaining. So we're going to keep track of the number of events, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, back and forth. There's going to be a final number, but then I'm also going to keep track of the total number of times I execute these particular routines. So that's the total iterations. And then we get down to the main function down here. This is the wrapper function. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize that counter variable as a 0. And then I'm going to basically just create a for next loop that'll wrap through it 100 times. So by going through it 100 times, that's just going to simulate 100 iterations of this particular script. That number can be really anything. It could be 1 to 500,000 if you wanted to. Inside of that, I'm going to put an if statement that's basically going to use the sample in order to create a random number. So I'm just going to say, let's take a sample of numbers between 1 and 100. If the number is greater than 50, I'm going to add to the counter. If it's less than 50, then I'm going to remove from the counter. That's just kind of simulating whether or not something is coming into the queue or leaving the queue. So add, remove, add, remove, add, remove. Very simple. It goes through this 100 times, and then it turns around and prints out the results, passing through that counter variable, which we're keeping track of, as well as the iteration, which is the incremental number as it goes forward, printing off function complete. Now, the final statement I'm going to have in here is I'm just going to execute the main statement. And so by executing that, then it'll test it to make sure that it's correct. And so right now, if we just go ahead and clear the output, I go ahead and run it. So right here we see that it's gone through 100 iterations, total number of events it's processed. At the end, what's left in the queue is going to be 5, and it's gone through 100 times. Now if we look back up, we can see right here the first 3 times it tried to remove, and then it started to add at that point. And so that's where the add and subtract is coming into play. Now if let's say I wanted to do this 10,000 times, I could simply make this 10,000 right here. And then if I just rerun the main function again, takes a little bit longer, but you can see it makes it through 10,000 iterations. And at the end, I have 125 events that are still left inside of the queue. So this should give you enough to get you past the exercise. If you have any questions, and again, you can see how simple the solution could potentially be, you could take something like this and create one on the bus simulation. You could create one very simply from something like this. So, not the solution, but it's enough of it, that enough of a direction that it'll probably finish it up for you. So, any other questions, please just hit me up. Thanks.